Welcome to Think Tank, the podcast. This is Steve Adubato, and joining me at the East Main Media Studio is my colleague, Mary Gamba. Before we listen to our friend and colleague, Patricia Stark, who knows a lot about communication and teaching people how to be better communicators in Think Tank, the podcast, Mary, communicate and tell people how to find us.
We'd love to. So to hear more Think Tank podcasts, you can subscribe to the Think Tank podcast on Apple iTunes or Google Play, or visit our website at steveadubato.org. That's ADUBATO. And you can follow us on Twitter at Steve Adubato, as well as on Facebook at Steve Adubato, PhD.
So, Mary and I do a weekly show on leadership called the Leadership Hour, the Steve Adubato Leadership Hour with Mary Gamba. And it's interesting because we talked to Patricia Stark, who is a friend and colleague. She teaches and coaches in the field of communication. Her brand is called Confidence.
Confidence.
I thought it was confidence.
Well, I think it's a combination of both. And I think the biggest takeaway for me from Patricia's interview, and just overall, we've known her for years. And you need to be, in order to be confident, it's not just about having confidence when being a leader and communicator. It's about really having that sense of being calm, being confident in who you are and being present in the moment. And she really talks about a lot how just looking inward and having positive affirmations. I think one of the faults we all have as human beings is we point out our own weaknesses, but instead, if we happen to look inward and identify our strengths, then outwardly we're going to really relay to others a sense of confidence.
So it's just interesting. Patricia, we've worked together for many years. We've done broadcasts together. She can be seen on a lot of networks. She used to be an anchor on a major national network. But her greatest joy is teaching and coaching and getting people past their anxiety and fear of speaking in public. And Mary, you and I have talked about this a lot, but Patricia in this interview talks about self-care, self-talk, also foods you can eat.
Yeah, foods and
I
also
didn't know, understand that.
A lot of times, if you think about a car, if you put in a less expensive gas in your car, it's not going to perform as well as if you put in a better quality of gas. And your body works the same way. Your body needs sleep. Your body needs good foods. I think a lot of times we have so much on our plate, balancing the hat that we wear as parents and as employee and every other thing that we're doing, that we forget to take care of ourselves. And Patricia really focuses on that self-care aspect of really creating a more whole self.
Real quick, before we go into Think Tank, the podcast, with Patricia Stark. Real quick, you have become a more confident, a calmer communicator in public than, we've talked about this before on our Leadership Hour. You are way stronger and more confident in public. How?
I breathe. I used to think the worst. I used to go into a situation and just believe that everyone was going to be looking for the worst in me. And I learned from you in your training and coaching and just really tuning in to myself that breathing, pausing, and being confident in what you know, but also admitting what you don't know are some of the keys to really just successful presentation skills. But for me, it's been breathing. I think just breathing is such a significant part of becoming confident.
Yeah, if you don't breathe, bad things can happen.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
So that's Mary Gamba. This is Steve Adubato, but you're about to listen to Think Tank, the podcast, produced by Lauren Gary, by someone who really gets it. And this is Patricia Stark. And this shows you, when you check out Patricia, the diversity, the range of guests that we have talking about all kinds of topics. And this is Think Tank, the podcast that you cannot afford to miss. Check it out. One of the best communicators and coaches in the field you ever find. Patricia Stark is a good friend. She's an author, communication expert, and professional development coach and trainer. Good to see you, my friend.
Great to see you, Steve, as always.
You and I have been talking about communication for a long time.
Yes.
And we also worked together at another network at a different time in our lives.
Yes, we did.
When did you become fascinated by how we communicate, how we don't communicate, and how you feel how you knew you were able to help them?
Well, I think being a reformed, shy person from a very young age, which because of what I do for a living, people don't usually believe that, but it is true. And knowing how nerve-wracking and disabling it can be to not be able to communicate confidently and trust yourself.
You said disabling.
Yeah,
Did you
it
mean
really
to say
is.
that?
Yeah, it makes you feel frozen and not able to achieve and accomplish a lot of goals, a lot of things in your life, including relationships, your career, your future, so many things. And when I was working in broadcasting and then started transitioning to doing my coaching and training, I found that the underlying thread that runs through all of the things that I was helping people do through trying to coach them through public speaking or media training or interview skills was that you need to find this thread of calm confidence. And that's how I came up with the term confidence, which helped me to write my book. And I weave that into all of my training now, because the way that we communicate internally, the story we tell ourselves, completely affects our ability to communicate outwardly to others.
You know, sometimes I think there's this group of us who are obsessed by communication who sometimes get so close to it because we do it for a living, and we don't appreciate the anxiety, the fear, all the other insecurities and things that go along with it, but they're very real.
Yes.
And here's the thing I'm curious about. You and I were just talking before we got on the air, and in my coaching, I do a lot of coaching in the field, and Patricia and I have consulted in other situations and talked about certain clients and shared our approaches. I'll say to someone, come in with a 3-minute presentation on something that really matters to you. It's a corporate situation, whatever it is, institutional higher learning, whatever it is. They'll come in with a speech, and they'll read the speech.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say, no, just tell me why this is so important. No, I need my speech. And then when I take it away, they'll say, quote, I'm uncomfortable.
Yes.
And without belaboring them, I'll just say, your job is to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Exactly. You say?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's simply because no one has ever shown them a better way. We're used to thinking, I got to write out my speech and I got to deliver my speech. Don't
we learn that in school sometimes?
We do learn that in school. And it's incorrect, because what we really need to be doing is having a human conversation with other human beings.
Devil's advocate. Someone says, Steve, you don't understand. It's a speech. It's a formal speech. It's not that.
Yeah.
And we say?
I say it should not be a formal speech. It should be a human conversation. Always. I don't care what you're talking about. People don't want to be spoken at and
lectured
spewed information
to.
out. Right. There's only 2 ways to give people information. You can either push it out at them or pull them in with stories and pull them in with being human and being relatable.
Engage them.
You can't do that if you're just reading words off of your page.
You know, it's interesting. I've watched the video of your work in the studio you work in when you're coaching people. You really do get people out there outside their comfort zone and doing it. And I'm a big believer, doing it and doing it again. And all of a sudden, like your son plays baseball, our sons play baseball. I'm uncomfortable. Get up at bat a few times. You still may be nervous, but what?
Yes. Well, a good psychologist friend of mine told me, just because you're nervous doesn't mean you're not going to do a good job. And that, I thought, was brilliant, because everybody thinks I shouldn't be nervous. If I'm prepared, if I'm really good at what I do, I shouldn't be nervous. No, being nervous means that you care. It means that everything is ready to be firing on all 8. You are where you need to be. Think of launching a rocket ship. Everything that has to happen, combustion-wise, explode. You know,
I bet you some people are nervous out of NASA.
Yeah, well, hopefully they
Right.
are. But I tell people, just be courageous for 20 seconds. Because if you get out there, usually in the first 30 seconds to a minute, everything starts to kind of settle and you find your footing. Because in the beginning, it can feel like an out-of-body experience. But do what you can to desensitize yourself to the situation. Feel the fear and do it anyway, as there's a famous book that says that.
That's right.
But the more you avoid, the worse it gets. And then procrastination is the biggest confidence killer that's out there.
Yeah. Try this, because we're also going to use this interview on a podcast and radio show we do called The Leadership Hour. The connection between being a great leader and having to be a really solid communicator is?
I think that, and I know we've talked about this in another interview, the best communicators are the best listeners. And a leader really listens and really wants open lines of communication, and they want it to be a 2-way street. Open door policies we've heard of, from really the best. So you can't be a good leader without being a good communicator.
Push back. Someone says, oh, you mean someone being a great public speaker?
No. I think, first of all, unless you're just talking to yourself in private, everybody is a public speaker. But we just put this thing on it from hearing about people having public speaking fear. And maybe I call it a fear, it's like a side effect fear of maybe you were speaking one time when you were going through puberty. Maybe it was at the funeral of a loved one. Maybe something was just happening in your life where you broke up with somebody or got divorced or whatever, and now you have to speak, and it goes badly.
By the way, stay
now
right
you
there.
associate it with speaking.
Sorry for interrupting while we're talking about listening.
Sure.
I remember I had a client one time who was very afraid, 50-year-old guy, wanted to be president of a bank, freaking out about speaking. And I said, but you're one of the top people in your field. Why is it? And I'm talking to him privately, and he said, Steve, when I was 14, I was running for student body president or class president. I had these index cards. I dropped the cards, and when they dropped them on the floor, I had to pick them up, and everyone was laughing.
And he's carrying that around like luggage.
He's 52 years old. He was 14 years old, and he can't.
He can't let it go.
You hear that all the time.
Absolutely. He can't let it go. I've had psychologists that I've consulted with, because I'm not one and I want to guide a client well, tell me that they've literally had to go through some kind of like a hypnosis with clients to get them to say goodbye to that childhood person in them. Say goodbye to that little girl or little boy that had that experience in your mind and physically let it go.
But you also help them do that. Real quick, before I let you go, a couple ways to get more calm and confident in the same time?
Well, there's so many,
Give us a
but
couple.
one thing is to picture your mind like a shaken snow globe. We're all juggling 8 million things, and we feel like we're not walking around with clarity. Just for 30 seconds at the water cooler or behind a closed door, watch your mind settle to where you can see all of that settle, and then walk into a situation with a clear mind. Deep breathing exercises, we hear that, but it's not in when someone says, you're nervous, take a deep breath. It's in the release of that. Breathe and then let it all out. There's so many things in my book of the same name, Confidence, that will be published soon, that are all kind of exercises to help you get clarity, calm of body, mind, and spirit. The list goes on.
Every time our friend Patricia Stark joins us, I learn something new about communication and leadership and everything connected to that as well. I hope you did as well. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Well done. Stay
Always
right
a
there.
pleasure.
This is One-on-One. I'm Steve Adubato. I'll be right back. Thank you.
To watch more One-on-One with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
The doctor's in the house. She is Dr. Stephanie Sitnick, Assistant Psychology Professor, Department of Psychology and Counseling, Colville University. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
I'm fascinated by this whole question that you've been researching, talk about, and teach and help people on. It has to do with screen time. Screen time and our young children. We happen to have 3, 2 teenagers and an 8-year-old. And I'm thinking, we're having dinner. What are you doing? And they think they can have the conversation and still be on the screen.
Right.
How do we give some tangible, practical advice for us, those of us who are parents who are frustrated?
Well, I'd say the first thing that maybe to think about is, what are you modeling for your kids, right?
Hold on, we're talking about them, not us.
I know, but they learn from us,
do.
right? And it's hard, right?
It's right there.
You're so accessible. You have to just, it's always right there. But I think limit setting is really important,
Define
right? Saying, okay, you have a certain amount of time that you can have access to a screen, or within this sort of restrictions, right? Dinner time maybe is a no screen zone for the family. I mean, you have to do what works best for each family, but certainly with limit setting is important, but then parents have to follow those limits too.
We can't just say it.
Right, exactly.
We have to do it and model it.
Exactly.
Who put out some new guidelines on this recently?
American Association of Pediatrics just released some new guidelines. They had older guidelines that I think they began to realize with the increased access of phones and tablets and computers, and that they just weren't very practical. So they've adapted those guidelines a little bit to be a little more flexible and to kind of incorporate the fact that what every child and family needs might be a little bit different.
Doctor, how do we make this whole question of screen time and the technology right in front of us, what are some of the good, positive things about it for younger people? And then where does the line cross and we go, hey, this is not good?
There are so many great things about it, right? I mean, even for adults, the world is open to us now, right? All of kind of the knowledge, and we have access to things and knowledge and people that we never had before. For younger children, there's a lot of educational programs. There's a lot of educational television shows and apps and things like that that can really be quite helpful, right? They're great. I think the line is more when we have too much use or dependence on use.
Or also what they're using it for.
Right, or exactly
using it for
what they're
research,
using
to
it.
get information,
Right.
to tap into something you otherwise wouldn't be aware of, be exposed to. That's one thing. But the constant game playing over and over
Right.
again, I ask myself sometimes, do our kids even know? Or, listen, I'll cop to this. There's sometimes I go on Facebook and I'll think, I got to get out of
Just
here.
lost a half hour, yeah.
I literally have to get out of here. You know, and much less if I'm posting something and then I go, so-and-so hates me for saying that? Well, why do they hate me? Let me find out. What am I doing? I don't even know these people.
Right. It's a rabbit hole,
Much less
right?
Twitter.
Yeah.
Define the rabbit hole.
Oh, I mean, I think we all have experienced this, right? When you sort of think, oh, I'm just going to go on for a minute or two. I'll just check my email, or I'll just go onto Facebook or Twitter, and then all of a sudden, a half hour, 45 minutes later, you think, oh, that's not what I planned.
Yeah.
And I think that happens to all of us to some extent, right?
When you are, in fact, practicing what you practice, teach what you teach, to what degree, being as young as you are, have you been influenced by the technology? Because someone 20 years older than you plus in your field, he or she
Right.
may not approach this the same way, but you're pretty close to this.
Well, I don't know if I'm, well, thank you. I don't know if I'm as close as
But you're relatively close.
I mean, when I first went to college, when I was first in undergrad, that was really when the internet was kind of starting, when we first had email and things like that. And when we did research, we still had to go to the library and still go get the paper book,
Right.
you know? So it's been really exciting being in an academic field that I have access to all of that knowledge, right? But I think adults as well as children really have to learn how to be discriminating, right? Is this a trustworthy source? Is this not a trustworthy source? With my own children, we really try to keep a close watch on what they're consuming.
How do you do that?
Well, I have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. With my older son, we really set time limits, and we kind of monitor maybe if he wants to play video games or watch television shows or things like that. We kind of watch what he's doing. We use parental controls on the computer, things like that. With my youngest, we make sure to watch with him so that we can discuss things. Maybe.
You got to be on this. You've got to be all over.
Oh, absolutely, and it's changing. I mean, I have no doubt that in a few years that my oldest son will far supersede me in terms of his technological skills. Right?
Stephanie, sorry for interrupting. The time we have left.
No.
Older children. We have sons who go on the internet and they'll say, "Dad, I read such and such in the news." I go, "Really? You read that in the news?" I don't know what that's coming from, and I have to ask where it is. And I think that's a source that's not only biased, but they're set up
Absolutely.
to be biased. They admit they're biased. And our kids can't tell the difference sometimes between that and some objective information source. What about that whole piece of it?
Some of us adults can't either.
That's
right?
right.
I mean, I think that's something that the sooner we start teaching children to be critical is really important, that we do that as quickly as possible, right? Where is this coming from? Why might they want us to have a particular slant or not? So that they can start to make those kind of decisions, right? Is this a trustworthy source or not?
A few seconds left. Children with special needs,
Yes.
what do you want to say here as it relates to screen time?
Technology has been really great in terms of some of the apps available, communication apps that can increase that, access to just ways to talk with other people, certainly. But I think we also have to limit in that regard too, right? Is the child emotionally able to sort of handle different material, things like that we just have to keep a close eye on.
Dr. Stephanie Sitnick, who is Assistant Psychology Professor, Department of Psychology and Counseling at Caldwell University, one of our longtime higher ed partners, which I want to disclose. I recently taught a leadership seminar for a group of doctoral students in the field of education, some very fine students. I want to thank you for joining us, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me.
Well done.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 30 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by the Turl Fund, supporting Right from the Start NJ, Atlantic Health System, NJM Insurance Group, Summit Medical Group, New Jersey Resources, PNC Bank. And by Suez, transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.
NJM Insurance Company has been serving New Jersey policyholders for more than 100 years. But just who are NJM's policyholders? They're the men and women who teach our children, the public sector employees who maintain our infrastructure, the workers who craft our manufactured goods, and New Jersey's next generation of leaders, the people who make our state a great place to call home. NJM, we've got New Jersey covered.